This is Sterling Golfing.
Coughing. Well, I am coughing. This is true there.
And I'm really not sure what he's going to talk about now because we've kind of bounced back and forth a little
I
bit.
don't either. The thing is, I made these slides today at work because I didn't have anything better to do, and everyone went home for the extended weekend. I'm Sterling N0SSC. I'm 26 years old, and I just renewed my license today. So that means I've been in the hobby for exactly 10 years, actually, on Saturday or Sunday. So that's pretty cool. Which means I've been a ham since like age 15 in 2007. And I've been doing some cool stuff. I used to be the ARR youth editor, and I've been going to Hamvention almost every year for the last several years. And I've been doing things relating to basically evangelizing ham radio and pro-elasticizing it, and getting it out to the young people and the all people, and keeping rookies and new licenses interested and retained. And I can't do that all myself, so that's why I'm here to try and help you guys. I went to Hamvention last weekend and had a big blast. You were there, and a lot of people say, what did you find at Hamvention at the flea market? And I just say I found a cold. So apologies if I sound coughy, sneezy, all that stuff, but I'm over it, so nobody should get sick, hopefully. So this is going to pretty much build upon what the treasurer, I forget your name.
I'm
Alan, Vice President, sorry, said about ham radio is dying, right? He said that the club is weakening, all the members are leaving, right? Is that what you said?
Oh, yeah.
Wrong. Ham radio is far from dying, contrary to what the myth, what has everybody's heard. This is basically kind of my analysis by pictures and some kind of free-form thinking of ham radio today, like the state of ham radio. Call it a state of the union, if you will. And I'll first start off with youth and rookie activities, and also mention school and scouting and stuff. On 2016, I got invited by Ward Silver, basically. He's the president of YASME, which is basically a foundation, an amateur radio foundation that gives out scholarships and grants, to go to YOTA, Youngsters on the Air. This is a week-long camp in the European Union. In 2016, it was in Austria, where a bunch of people my age and under, I'm actually the top end. 26 years old is the highest age. They don't have they kind of have a fuzzy boundary, but generally everybody's below the age of 26. And it's a week-long, basically almost like a scout camp, except we go to youth hostel and we learn how to build antennas, how to put up an emergency station. We go hiking and do summits on the air. We have VHF sprints, really similar to the repeater and the VHF sprints we've been having here. And it's like 110 young hams, and you never would have imagined you could see this many young people in the hobby in one place at one time. And the whole reason why we went there is to think about ways of bringing it to the U.S., because here in the U.S., youth in ham radio are scattered and sporadic. You hear about Bears Jr. or Bark Jr. in Boulder, Colorado. There's this school that just churns out new, super passionate hams and engineers, that grow into a career in electrical or RF or radio engineering. And then you hear about Yacht. I think it's a young communicators amateur ham team there in Minnesota, but it's kind of like a decentralized group that usually just have nets on Echolink and HF. But over in Europe, they have a club of almost thousands of young hams, because somehow they figured out how to make amateur radio exciting for young people. They also started the youth contesting program. This is an Estonian station, ES2 or ES7, I forget the full call sign. But it's a multi contest station. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 operators operating a contest right now. You can think, for example, CQ Worldwide WPX contest is a CW contest going on right now, and guys are in their shacks doing this. But these are young people. He's 15, he's 16, another guy back there is 18, and they're doing single sideband. And the point of this contesting program is to bring young people into these super stations, because it's super exciting to work a pileup. And it's surprisingly simple. I did my first field day at WA0FYA in Washington, and this was my first ever HF experience. The guy, I think it was N0YCX, Ron was his name, is his name. He put me by a radio, and he put me on the logger, and he just started slowly giving me A, B, 0, Q, X, M, O, blah, blah. And, I was typing it in, and I slowly got the hang of it, slowly started figuring out phonetics, like, right on the spot, just because the phonetic alphabet is the first letter. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And figured out the exchange, and so it was soon enough, about 10 contacts later, I was flowing information in the logger pretty quick, and he was like, wow, you got that pretty quick. About 20 more contacts later, he switched sides with me, so I actually got on the radio, and I made like the longest first contact ever because I kept looking at him like, what do I say now? Just look at the script. This is Whiskey Alpha 0, like, and the guy was like, can you say your state again? I'm like, what state are we in? It was really nerve-wracking. Next contact was a little bit shorter. Next contact was a lot shorter, and then by the 200th contact, I was running running a pilot basically. It was exhilarating, and that's exactly what like these young people experience. But over here in the U.S., we don't have anything like that. We have the Youth DX Association does an adventure to Costa Rica or Curacao. PJ2T, you might have heard, they're a super big contest station in Curacao. And they take these young hams down there for a week, and they put them on the air, and they act as DX, and they get pile-ups. Basically the same as these, except in a little bit, I think it's more like a de-expedition rather than a contest, but they've been doing a few contests lately. But there are lots of mega stations here. K9CT is probably the one really close to us near Normal, Illinois, and then you have K3LR, K1TTT, K5, I forget, but there's like these guys with 20 towers on their property and 60 stations, like all set to go, operate, dozens of people all at once for a contest, and it's super fun, and young people love competition. That's why video gaming is so hyper popular. Look at Fortnite on twitch.tv. I know a lot of you may have never heard of this, but this is like esports and video gaming. I can see amateur radio as a video game. We have objective. We need to make as many contacts as possible. And we do that with our equipment and our antennas and surprisingly very little infrastructure. And that's one thing that makes it really exciting for a lot of the people I met, including myself. And that's the way I see it going forward. Now, scouting is one thing we have all over the world. Here we have the Radio Merit Badge, and that's that's a program where you bring in a scout, put them behind a radio, they make a certain number of contacts, and they also learn a Morse code supplement. I'm not too familiar because I stopped scouting at Cub Scouts, but that has gotten a lot of new hams licensed. It's been really successful, and every year there's a jamboree on the air where there's like millions of scouts that come in to operate a radio to get their merit badge, and it's a huge on-the-air activity. And I think, some years they estimated in the hundreds of thousands of scouts actually getting on the air and making contact. So it's pretty successful. And then ARRL has come up with the Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative, finally. It's an initiative started by a grant from an Ivy League alumni to support colleges with amateur radio stations. I am from W0EE. I say I got a BS EE at Rolla. Because I spent most of my time at the club station and at Missouri S&T or UMR. And that was like a pinnacle moment because having this ham radio experience there and fixing repeaters and learning how duplexers work and how to fix coax and troubleshoot like where in the line is the fault, time domain reflectometry. I learned that on my own. That got me my job at the Very Large Array. And then that got, got on my resume, and now I work at Boeing doing radio communication stuff for Boeing. So it's a win-win, and I'd really enjoy it. So all of these initiatives are here to support youth, and they've been going on, and I've been like kind of tasked as the ringleader to try to get these kind of programs here into the U.S., and I'm reaching my hands out saying like, hey, we need some help, volunteers, ideas even, of like what can we do to entertain a bunch of young hams. And there's tons. Like I went to Hamvention, and you look around, and although there's a bunch of people riding in scoot-arounds, and most everyone's like great hair, but there's still like, wow, it's surprising to see like the number of young people. And I'll mention that here in a minute too. So I have an idea. Ward Silver kind of started this idea, Ham Radio 2.0. It's the idea of the next generation of ham radio. Ham radio 1.0 is getting a radio, contesting and rag chewing and getting a VHF radio, calling in a repeater, running a net, that sort of stuff. But ham radio is changing. I wrote this article, Millennials Are Killing Ham Radio, and don't believe the title. It's actually clickbait. What it really means is that ham radio is changing. Millennials like me are interested in other things than the previous generation. For example, I'm really interested in contesting, and it seems like over in Europe more hams are contesting than over here. Or I'm really into technology and these FT8 modes, and I'm sure several of you have experimented with FT8 as well. But also I'm interested in Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, and lightning mapping is something that uses radio technology to collate the exact position where lightning strikes to like within 100 meters using time domain reflectometry, which can be used in fox hunting. And it's a lot of these like pieces of radio that just come together to solve a problem like that. Even ADSBs is something similar. And then machine-to-machine communication, like imagine cars talking to other cars so that they know how to stay from each other and they can like all run through lights at the same time. It's not ham radio, but it is going to be using radio technology, and it's a really important thing to kind of seed a young person's mind that you need radio to do these kinds of things to enable the next generation of technology. Because it is kind of true, ham radio has lost its forte in technology. Like we have cell phones, we have Wi-Fi, and we're no longer as hams really pushing the bleeding edge, with the exception of these super weak signal modes. Used to be like Bell Labs was just full of hams who had like Collins transceivers in their basement, and they were one of the ones building cell phones in 802.11 and bringing technology to where it is today. But now we've just kind of like frozen, we have a frozen picture of ham radio, and it's slowly kind of eking into the future. But with a new generation, with this idea in mind, I think we'll see a lot more. Instead of buying an HF rig, more hams are going to buy a 802.11 mesh unit, and we're going to start doing more meshing and communicating using what seems to be old school, like IRC and Mumble, like internet relay chat, over a mesh, over a completely isolated darknet, if you will. And that, and that technology exists today, and it's very cheap to do. And a lot more microwave. Microwave electronics are cheaper today than ever before to get into like 60 gigahertz, because believe it or not, every opening door, automatic opening door, has a 60 gigahertz radar in the thing at the top of the door that tells the thing there's somebody on the way. It looks at the Doppler shift of a person approaching. Those little chips are super cheap, and if you hack them the right way, you can make a 60 gigahertz CW transmitter. It won't go very far, but you get on a high mountain and you can talk a pretty long way, or bounce it off an airplane and stuff. And that stuff's like really fun, and I think we should do more of that. And please feel free to stop me at some point in here. I'm going to ask have a kind of a Q&A interactive session to kind of figure out what we can do to make ham radio great again. I should have wore my make ham radio great again hat. So at Hamvention, so this is Ward Silver. He brought the Ham Radio 2.0 idea to Hamvention. We had this little corner where people could talk about the next generation. There was somebody talking about using LiDAR to make the next generation of amateur radio direction finding maps. They use very high resolution topographical maps. And he gave us a demonstration on how he actually takes the data, the free data from the USGS, and as well as LiDAR, which is laser radar, which is a laser on planes that maps the ground to a very, very, very precise level to make new geospatial maps. Another person was talking about GNU Radio, which is a program similar to MATLAB or to LabVIEW that allows you to drag and drop blocks of signal modifiers to take, for example, an RTL SDR chip, which is a $20 dongle you can plug in your computer that will receive anything between 24 and 1700 megahertz. And you can decode anything with it, not just this typical FM, AM, PSK, CW, that single sideband, but you can decode POC-SAG and pagers and random FSK modes that are being emitted by your smart meter on the side of your house or your garage door opener, that sort of thing. And just a couple of, was it a month ago, Balance Sieber came out with this groundbreaking realization, which, so believe it or not, it has been around for a long time, of replay attacks on tornado sirens. And he found out using GNU radio and using a very simple, like, decode what they're sending and replay it, that he could set off all of the tornado sirens in a 20-mile radius using a $20 radio. And a lot of us might have known we could do that with DTMF on our HTs because we are police scanners too. We've heard the dispatch tones turn the tornado sirens off and on again. But all of a sudden it like upended this, this, I guess, emergency communications and local area notification community. Everybody's changing their sirens and all that stuff. So it's a good thing for mass awareness that he hacked the sirens before anybody else actually caused like a major incident. So ham radio 2.0 right there. And he's like a very avid ham doing this kind of like stuff. Another person came in and talked about the ham radio science initiatives that you see in like the last picture. He talked about the, up here, thunderstorms in 6 meters. How do thunderstorms interfere or augment or change 6-meter propagation? The idea being lightning ionizes a small portion of the atmosphere right above it, or some sort of ducting happens. I personally had an experience with Ward driving from Hamvention one year. I really like running 6 meters in the summer on mobile because it just operates really well. When the band's open, the band's wide open. It's really easy to make contacts. Didn't work a single station until we were beneath a hail core of a severe, like a really severe, like dime-size hail lightning storm. Like lightning was going off within hundreds of feet. Ward was like white knuckle driving, and I was sitting there calling CQ and running like 10 stations a minute, and everyone's like, "Are you okay? Are you driving? I can hear all that rain." It's like, "Oh, there's just a hailstorm, QRZ." But I made 5 contacts between Louisiana, Mexico, Texas, and like Georgia, all in the span of that hail core. And as soon as we got out to the other side, the sun came out, the 6-meter propagation just disappeared. And I was like, what is happening? And now there's this research saying there might be a correlation. There's that yellow line that kind of goes up is a regression line that took all of this data from all of these reverse packet clusters of people spotting their friends on 6 meters, that with combining that with radar data, trying to see if there's a real correlation between where a lightning storm shows up between 2 points that have had a 6-meter QSO. And then there was a whole thing on the solar eclipse QSO party, and they just released that data, showing some really, really positive data on the solar eclipse deionizing and recombinating the ionosphere into basically nighttime propagation, opening up 80 and 160. First Robotics had a showing here, and they're not pretty much ham radio at all. Like they don't really use wireless a lot of the time. Sometimes I don't know if sometimes they're not allowed. I've seen umbilicals like drive the robots around, but oftentimes they do use some sort of wireless solution. But the parallels with our technology and robotics technology are very, very similar. Like it's a nerdy, cool thing to do. It solves a problem, and they can also be meshed together. Think about remote RC aircraft flying. A lot of hams are getting their license so that they can buy FPV or first-person view goggles and transmitters so they can fly their planes, their remote control planes, farther and longer than what they can do with a Part 15 device. It's surprising how many people were showing up to this first booth. Well, I guess it wasn't, because our passions, our hobbies are so similar, and supporting, and they got all these donations, and they were selling like little trinkets and 3D printed things and that sort of stuff. But that's a very interesting way that we could probably get some more hams, is by showing our faces and talking about ham radio, because these people are interested, these young people interested in robotics are also interested in other nerdy things. turns out they just don't know about ham radio. And the second you say, oh, I'm a ham, and what's that? That's where we talk to this and we do these antenna things. It's like, oh, I've always wanted to do that, you know. At Hamvention, we also had Yoda show up. This is Florian from Austria, and we also had a guy from South Africa, 2 guys I met at the Yoda camp. And it was the first time they came over to Hamvention here, and they were just eyes wide open. Everybody's super friendly and super excited to meet them and them to meet, you know, everyone else. We had a really good time with them there, and they actually went to the ARRL, or the CQ Magazine contest dinner, and announced the youth contesting program. And so that basically all of the big guns were in that room from the United States, and I imagine it planted a good seed for them to get that program started. And then Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative also showed up. We had a pretty good showing of, you know, mostly alumni, but a lot of us are masters and undergraduates there too. And we had a big collegiate dinner. It always is a good thing. And the Youth Forum has been going on. This was the 25th year for the Carol Perry's WB Chu MGP, her Youth Forum. It's a forum where usually around the age of 10 to 15 to 20 come up and speak for about 10 minutes on a thing that they've done in ham radio. One person talked about decentralized APRS like beacons in a very compact like PVC tube that he could deploy on roofs and mountaintops and towers all over the place to create an ad hoc, like all of a sudden there's a APRS network type of thing. Another guy came up from India to talk about how ham radio has helped his family in India in like times of crisis. A whole bunch of, there were like 10 other young people, very young, like surprisingly young, giving speeches about, you know, even as simple as learning CW. What's the right way to learn CW from an 8-year-old? And they all got like, I don't know, $50,000 worth of prizes, and the whole room was just like, this really tells you, it's a really telling story of ham radio isn't dying. It's really active, and a lot of young people are, itching at the bit to do more with it. So that was Hamvention. And then there's Friedrichshafen, which is in Germany. I'll be going to that. I'll be getting on a plane tomorrow at 1 o'clock to go to Munich to go check this out, because I want to see more. I want to see where the young people are doing and how they do Hamvention over here. Instead of taking over, we used to be at Hera Arena, which was kind of this dump of a, you know, old hockey sports arena, but they moved it to a fairgrounds area, and there's signs all over the place saying, "You have just touched animals. Go wash your hands." And it's just like, we're all hams. Hams are, you know, animals, right? But this is at an airport, at a very, very, very nice, super nice place, with these huge, like, airplane hangars near the Lake Bonenzi, which is just a beautiful place. And I hear it's way more, it's almost like going to a corporate conference or like a consumer electronics show, where there's a lot more like companies coming to show there, like Hilberling and Tektronix and Rigol, like companies that make products for radio engineers, will have like really proper setups rather than kind of just a mishmash of all of the ham radio companies lined up, you know, all over the walls. So it'll be really interesting. And they also have those too. And they also have a flea market, but they have a enormous contingent of younger people. So I'd be interested to see that. Even in the picture, you can see like there's much fewer gray-haired people there than you see at Hamvention. But that's not to say there aren't old people in Europe doing ham radio. Surely they are, but there's, for some reason, way, way more young people into it as well. So I mentioned a few problems. There's a boom in technician licensing, but a decline in Elmering. The ARRL and pretty much all the story at Hamvention was that we need to get more Elmering. We need to get like these technicians who are just getting into the hobby, only getting their license for a little while and just not figuring out what to do with it. The reason being because they don't have an Elmer, a person or a mentor showing them the ropes, what to do. Another problem is that there's so many repeaters, but there's nothing but nets. There's nothing but, you know, guys just rag chewing who always have rag chewed for the past 20 years. There's trouble, it seems, with all of these empty, somebody called them paper repeaters because they just don't act, they're not active and their only presence is on paper on a repeater directory. And then ARRL drama, a lot of you heard the N6AA censure, the big ordeal with, he was saying that what was it? I already forgotten. It was such a long time ago. The members, doesn't even remember. The members like didn't get to see he basically called out a rule that was kind of like questionable, like to the members, but he didn't say any opinions about it. And the official ruling was like, if you state your opinion that's against the board, then that's a bad thing. But he didn't, but they censured him anyway. They told him don't say that anyway. And then this just got into a big like poo throwing match between ARRL haters and this board of members who seem to be, board of directors who seems to be like the absolute worst. But trust me, they've kind of rescinded and backpedaled and everything's like a lot cooler now, but there's still a lot of like, what is ARRL doing to address these problems? Frankly, not much, but I don't think that's a bad thing. They're doing a lot of really good things. They're producing books, they're doing membership, they're doing grants for teachers, they're doing teachers institutes, they support tons and tons and tons of scholarships. Like they actually had $70,000, actually more, I think more than that, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of scholarships for young people. For college grads and undergrads and potential students, but only 300 people applied, and they still had like 80% of that scholarship money up for grabs. So I think we can do some things to fix that. Yo.
What is the thought of digital voice in the VHF and UHF bands for young people? Is that something that they enjoy, or is that something that they don't care about? Or
well,
what's the overall opinion?
I mentioned this in my blog that one of the ways that we can get youth involved and make them excited is by digital modes, and there's some truth to that. That yeah, we should show them digital modes and that computers are relevant to ham radio. It's not just calling CQ on the voice and learning Morse code. But it's not a save the hobby kind of move. It's not like, here's digital modes, you're going to love this. It's like, oh, cool, I can type some text and I can also do that on my phone. Like, but it is still interesting. And doing it on VHF, UHF, take for example, I started with a few other young people, the Young Amateur Radio Club, Youth Amateur Radio Club, YARC, and they have actually started doing digital modes over VoIP chat, which is like kind of two levels of why. Like you could just talk, but you're using like FT8 and CW and like really slow, super slow field. I don't know anybody here of Hellschreiber. For some reason, everybody like on this thing loves Hellschreiber because you can see like the text roll by. But they do that if they can't get an HF net going, because a lot of us don't have HF. They just do it on voice chat on Discord. So yeah, it's super interesting, and I think I, for one, like when I was in college, kept calling CQ on PSK31 on a repeater, and a few times a couple people caught, like, understood what was going on and got their stuff hooked up quick enough for them to reply, and I was like, yay, somebody did it. Because these kinds of things are just fun to experiment with, like, for, whatever reason. So yeah, I would always do that. And even Packet BBS is like, there's a fascination with old-timey sort of stuff, and one of the guys in the team on the new club started another voice server, and started doing Packet over a VoIP chat because our members are spread all over the place, and he set up a rudimentary store and forward bulletin board system, which kind of like, he did that for a weekend, and then, it kind of died off, but that's the way it goes, So, yeah.
To the point of the boom in technician licenses, I mean, it seems like everybody recognizes that demographically, by age, the aggregate ham population is skewed toward the older end. But I understand that the hobby's increasing, at least at a rate comparable to decades ago,
Mm-hmm.
if not a little more. But the technicians often never achieve anything higher than technician.
Yeah. That's
Is
true.
that the case?
That is true. Yeah, that's kind of the problem
Sterling,
like I'm having here. Yeah.
from the classes we've had in the last 12 months, in June of last year, October of last year, and March, we had 31. And I know of 9 that have upgraded either to general or even extra. So what's that?
Cool.
30%?
Mm-hmm. Good data point.
And the ARRL is working on a proposal for the FCC to change the privileges.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fishing class license.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. Very.
Sterling, your opinion, please. Do you
Sure.
think that what the ARRL is proposing to the FCC is really going to benefit?
Do I think what the ARRL is proposing to the FCC in terms of like the entry-level class licensing, the phone privileges? I do. I'm a firm believer in getting a sliver of voice and data HF privileges to technician licenses as an incentive to upgrade. Because when I was a technician, I would have really liked that. A lot of the opposition is like, I worked hard to get it, so why can't they? You know, and that's pretty much the only complaint I guess there is against it, and I can't defend it from a negative side.
The same argument applies for CW versus.
Yeah, when we lost the CW, like take that for example, when they got rid of the CW requirement, there was a huge this was around like the 2006-2008 where it dipped, and it dipped because of the solar cycle in part, which was really, it's kind of ironic that I got into ham radio at the minimum of that little dip, and for some reason I thought I was having a blast, but now I realize bands were dead. But they dropped the CW requirement, and it just exponentially exploded. And I feel like once they give techs a sliver of contest activity and digital modes as well as voice, that will have a similar, I don't think such a massive impact that CW had, but it will have a beneficial impact to retention. Kyle?
Did you see Jerry, I forget her last name, Ellsworth?
Ellsworth?
She gave a demo at Contest University. Tracy and Doug were there, and it blew my mind on the future of ham radio and virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
She was showing a demo and showing things that in the next 20 years, you put on VR glasses, you contest with them on, it shows scores, it brings in all your friends, you're competing against all your friends, you have a heads-up display, you put the goggles on, you can see hotspots in your coax, you can see the SWR on your dipole, you can see the radio waves being radiated off of your dipole to get them, the right angle, so you're DXing and getting the correct angle to get Poland, Austria or whatnot. It was unbelievable, the stuff that she was showing.
Yeah, she's a CEO of Cast AR. I think they might have changed the name or whatever because they went under and then came back, and they produce augmented reality goggles. She's really popular on Twitter as a in the hacker community. And I talked to her, and one of the other things was you got a neighbor with a noisy TV. Well, you can design your antenna and put a creek in it right here just to null out that direction. Right. So, and you can see it put it in on through the goggles, and that's and yeah, we had
What's the name of the company again?
Cast AR,
Spell it, please.
CASTAR,
CAST.
CAST, cast a fishing line AR. So we had Boeing Family Day, and there was a show of the HoloLens or HoloLens, the Microsoft augmented reality. It's a thing you can put on. You can see your space. It's not like doesn't totally block your vision, but you can see through it like sunglasses. But it also puts a computer simulation of, in our case, airplanes and their missile loadouts and stuff. And my poor friend Eric had to deal with like just a horde of kids like trying to like, I want to try. Like kids, like age 7 and 8 and 9, because that's what they're buying today. That's their gaming console is a thing that goes in your head and plugs into your computer, and then you can like physically move and shoot and look around. And another thing with that is 3D audio. One of the things contesters really want is a depth perception of stations, so that when you're working like single operator 2 radio or 3 or 4 radio, you can put radios here and here and here and here, and you can mentally focus using your brain the way we focus on conversations in a crowd. Focus on one station over the other, and as you're turning your head, you can either set it to do like this or stay in the same spot like a real like speaker basically. And that would like fit so well with AR, because then you could get like a notification saying like, here's a new molt, or like a thing like pointed this way, here's a new molt on this radio, so you point over to this radio and you operate that. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool stuff. I'm excited. So there's the kind of the Q&A. We kind of been going through this. These are some of the things I've proposed, and I've talked with ARRL and guys like Ward Silver on our long trips to Dayton and back, of what to do to answer those questions, to get Elmering up. And I know here we've done a really good job with the classes, and when we have people in the room who won't let these new techs come in without an introduction. That's one of the most important things that clubs are facing problems with is, a new person comes in, a visitor comes in, and they leave without saying hello to a single person, which should really be said as nobody says hello to them. It's not up to them. It's up to you, the club members, to bring in the new people and keep them welcomed, to make them welcomed, and invite them to your open shack. Raise your hand if you have HF, like an HF shack at your home. Raise your hand, keep your hand raised if you've opened it up for any new hams. When was so people with their hands up, when was the last time you had a new ham, like invited a new ham to your shack to operate? Really? Perfect. Couple years. Good. That's exactly what I'm kind of proposing here with open shacks. I know the St. Louis Radio Club has like a club station, and then WA0FYA had a club station, and they would always have those open. But here in the room, we have lots and lots of shacks, and it's a super important hook, I guess you could say, to get a person retained and get their hook set. They get bitten by the bug if you invite them to an open shack during like a contest weekend or during a special event or that sort of thing, so they can actually operate. And I've even gone so far as to propose an open shack directory where you can find somebody who has a shack open for somebody to come in and operate. Find them on the internet, similar to ARRL's Find a Club or the Field Day Locator site, because that would have helped me greatly. I think of like things in I guess 8 years ago when I was first getting into the hobby, what I've really enjoyed. Remote ham radio operating is also like one of the big key tenets in like this whole millennials are killing ham radio, because young people don't have money. We don't have the ability to afford stuff that we're not sure that we're getting into, but remote ham radio operation is similar to this open shack thing, except you never have to see the person or invite them in. They just operate remotely using a computer. And there's these services already, Remote Ham Radio and Remote Hams, that enable that. You just plug your radio into your computer with an interface. You set some configuration up to make sure you don't operate it out of band and that sort of stuff. And you make sure that the operator on the other end is actually licensed and that sort of thing. And then they can operate well within the bounds of your station. And that's been super helpful for me because I live in an apartment and I like to run nets for our young radio club, Young Amateurs Radio Club, and I also like to contest, and so I can go onto one of these bigger stations on remote ham radio. Those cost money for everyone 25 and up, but if you're 25 and below, you get a scholarship. So you can basically tune into like a mega station in Nova Scotia and operate DX like for a whole weekend.
So what would the price be for folks that
It's a graduated thing. Like it's like as low as 9 cents a minute for like 100 watts in a wire station, where you just kind of get on and want to check into a net or rag tube. But the top end contest stations are something like $1,000 a year for like the ultimate access, where you can kick anybody off and you basically rent out that station for a weekend for like super big station. And there's like this whole like sliding scale thing. I'm kind of iffy about the cost. Like, I don't really like that it costs that much, but then again, we pay thousands of dollars for our own stations at home. And if we can't do that at home, this is a good option. However, remote hams is totally free. It's free, and I don't think it's open source, but you can get it online, use a client called RCForb, RCFORB. And these are very ad hoc stations. I can just go put a station up right then and there. Yeah.
Run an RC4, but you gotta be careful because
Yeah.
you don't know, you're responsible for whoever's using your radio.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you gotta be careful. And they don't have as many controls in there as they should have.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of you grant them or you don't, and then they kind of got control of your whole station.
Yeah. I've talked to the people who run that, and it's a pretty small group of guys, and there's so many like feature requests to get more granularity in terms of how you define your station. So if a general comes on, you don't want them to get into the extra band on accident, so have a lockout. It's easier said than done, as well as your station. You just might not be able to tune up 80 meters on your antenna because it's only designed for 40 meters. And
The echo links and stuff work fine for what you're talking about,
Mhm.
holding nets with new hands.
mm-hmm.
Because you are transmitting over a repeater
Right.
through the internet,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit more controlled than using a remote station.
Right. And it's usually a VHF thing, and we do have Echolink nets, but we've been really wanting to get into HF as well. A lot of us are like, let's do HF, and you find a remote, and we've had to we've gone through the challenges of trying to persuade the operators, like, we know what we're doing, we're not going to break things, that sort of stuff. We're only going to operate 100 watts and voice, and I mean the control software on the client side is also kind of buggy and tough to use, and you can get yourself in a pickle. Like, I've actually hung up a transmitter and had to call the guy to be like, my software just crashed and I think your transmitter's on. Go check it out. But I think in the next coming years, more people are getting on that project and it'll get cleaner and easier to use. So what do you guys think? Any other solutions? Like, what do we do to get more young people involved and more people retained? Not just young people, but all people who come for a license.
So this idea, I can remember, I got into this in ham radio when I was 12.
Uh-huh.
It was because I went to one of my friend's house, his dad was a ham. And I saw the equipment and I just thought, well, this is cool stuff, right?
Mm.
But to that extent, being able to see a station like you're describing, even if it were virtual, but if you indeed could a guy could schedule time to visit
Mhm.
the station, that would be terribly difficult to set
Right.
up. You do that on the club site to some extent, or at least
Sure.
schedule time or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that probably would go a long way. And then would you probably target the maker crowd to a large extent, like you're alluding to,
Mhm.
the robotics guys and things like that, right? I mean, because there's a lot of overlap in the technology itself.
Yeah, a few years ago, the ARRL started going to a lot of maker fairs, like San Francisco, Kansas City, Denver, and they started kind of the maker ham movement, and now lots of clubs are going to maker fairs. I don't know if we have a maker fair here specifically. I know we have kind of like similar things. I remember one at Union Station, but I did go to one in Kansas City where we had a field day station. Maker Fair in Kansas City has field day, and that station was constantly bombarded because they had to walk past the station to get into the Union Station in Kansas City. So it was like a perfect location, and 5 people did their test that day, and then the next day more and more people had brochures, and the guy who ran it estimates he probably got 30 people licensed within the weekend, with that there, because even if they just kind of want to do it, they're interested in it, they want to get a license because went to ham study and just quickly skimmed through it and got their license, the more power to them. Cliff?
Sterling and Paul, add to this if you would. In the times that we've been doing the class for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, there's so many reasons that people are getting their license. Some of them get it for the hobby. Most of them do. There are others that we had a National Guard group that got it because the National Guard suggested they get it. Some people get it for public service. Some people get it for, I remember a group in, I think it was in Franklin County. The cell phones didn't work, and they said, okay, how can we communicate? Like 6 or 7 family members. And I remember after the class, okay, where do you live? You need a vertical, and where do you live? You need a beam so you can coordinate. So it depends on, to me, it depends on what reason a person is getting the license for them to move forward. Some want the license just to have the license and maybe go further. And I know Thomas is starting in middle school a class or a station, hopefully. And I noticed he's sitting next to Max, K0AZB, who has his high school. Max, your call sign is your high school, right?
Yes.
Your high school call sign. So different strokes for different folks. You need to find out what the reason and what motivated the person to get the license in the first place, and then I think target in that direction for them to continue to expand.
That makes ham radio both like a challenge and really exciting because there's so many things you can do.
So many.
Contact astronauts and talk to satellites. Tom?
What about the possibility of getting the FCC to develop a digital-only license?
Well, the FCC, from what I've heard between like Riley Hollingsworth and the Liberal Arrow, they're a mountain and they're immovable. And the best thing that we can do is change the like licensing structure, but we can't make like we could. I guess the ARRL could give a proposal to do that and do digital only, but that would be another hurdle to overcome. I think I think questions like that were considered in the whole deliberation on the entry-level licensing, and they kind of opened it up for all things. You can do CW and digital and everything on these like small portions of HF. So.
FCC is looking at taking frequencies away from hands, giving them to the phones because there's so much radio out there now, and they're trying to push digital. This is a little bit of information. But they're pushing the digital because it narrows down what they use so that they can take more. They have a reason why they could say that they're going to take some advantage of it.
True, but to counter that, one of the other problems with the FCC is the license or the regulations still limit you to like 300 baud, and that's like you can have a communication that's much narrower than 3 kilohertz and way more than 300 baud because we've gotten to a point where we can collaterate tons of different carriers into one single stream and output, 1,500 baud in half the space as, when they made the thing. Yeah, but it is true. Like the cost of spectrum in the 700 megahertz area is like in the billions, and they're like, we want some of that. Sorry, Tom.
Your question was what is a way to get youth or younger people more interested in ham radio? I would propose, and I'll level with you guys, my purpose here is not to facilitate ham radio in any way. I'm using it as an instrument for my purpose, which is to help my students to be more effective at STEM, because there are more jobs opening up in the STEM field.
Yeah.
30% is the number that gets thrown around, but it's increasing. I intend to use ham as something to spur their interest in it, and I think actually we might actually be able to serve one another effectively. The way that I'm proceeding on it is with NGSS. That's the new federal standards for, you guys have heard of Common Core, the federal standards for all states to fall within for science includes significant portions on magnetism, electricity, and waves, and circuits. I teach lessons on circuits, magnetism, electricity, and waves, and they're very, very interesting for the students. These are 8th graders, and they like it. I'm intending to have them build freaking radios. When I was a Boy Scout, I built a foxhole radio. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I'm not a ham guy, but I mean, I thought that was really, really neat. We built one.
Mm-hmm.
And kids that had almost no interest, these are fence sitter kids, a lot of the kids that I teach come from more rural areas in Jefferson County, Northwest District. Many of the students come from areas where they're struggling economically and whatnot. Many of those kids are like significant amounts and wanted to actually come to school so they could work on radios. Basic stuff like parallel circuits and series circuits. Okay,
Yeah.
that's easy. They're not going to go home and write home to mom or text somebody
Mhm.
about making a parallel circuit. But building a radio, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That kit is very easy. You can purchase that thing. But having that augmented with something like a station, very basic, and I hate to say it, more primitive, is probably better because they see this all the time.
Yeah.
But a radio that they just built, you know, resistors and diodes and transistors and all that nonsense, they made that, and then they're actually physically using it in their classroom, not just a club, but all students.
Yeah.
That's going to facilitate more of them actually participating, not just in your system or your goal with more operators or people more interested in it. It's going to help me a lot because those kids are going to go into high school and actually think things like, and don't say this to anybody else, but science is kind of cool. Maybe they'll, when they graduate from high school, when there's an opening at Boeing, perhaps they won't be like, you know what, I'm not going to even mess with that. I'm going to go and work at McDonald's or somewhere, which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
but at least they're not going to write themselves off because they've been exposed to something which they see that they can do, and it's going to be fascinating for them.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
the long answer is
Yeah.
yeah, that way.
That's perfect.
You know, that's great, and it's
Turn his lights on.
absolutely fantastic. What's sort of funny about this is Monday, this is one of the topics the board was talking about. How do
By the
we-
way, I had no idea about this. This is
Yeah.
a fluke.
Yeah.
Monday, the board was
Good timing.
talking
So much
about
for
how
emailing.
do we do something like this? How do we start working with the science or the STEM or whatever with some of these kids? What do we need to do? And we just started scratching that surface.
I really do
And this
think
is
that
great.
Mm-hmm. This is a core tenet in Yoda Camp. At Yoda Camp, we built things and we kept them. We all got 802.11 mesh units. We all built a roll-up antenna that we can emergency deploy. We all built a Raspberry Pi with a whisper beacon on top of it that would beacon out a propagation thing for indefinitely. And then Hans Summers of QRP Labs, he's sponsored the 2017 Yoda Camp, producing these 5-watt CW transceivers. It's a full radio for $50 normally, but he produced like 80 of them and gave them for free to the Yoda Camps. And I imagine if he can ever spool up that development, things like he would provide those to classes and stuff because they're super easy things to build and they're really functional. They're Morse code transmitters, which you can immediately hear on the air, and they're all all of their test circuitries built in. You can use them as oscilloscopes and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of questions and hands.
One caution, if you're active on social media, I'm talking Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, too often, I don't know too often is the right way, but from time to time you'll see, I'm talking ham radio stuff, those sites. Somebody will ask a question and some person will answer it, well, why don't you buy a real radio? That's a Chinese radio.
Yeah.
And then you'll see somebody that, well, why don't you, anybody that doesn't build their own antenna, they're not a real ham. If they didn't walk 30 miles backwards in 100 feet of snow to take the test 30 years ago,
Yep.
don't let that, don't be a part of that. Be positive.
Mm-hmm.
And, as far as Chinese radio, the last Yaesu I bought was made in China. So what the heck? Don't allow people. I'm not saying get on social media and blast them. That's not the way to do it. But it could be positive, not negative. I mean, a real ham is somebody that passed the test. It doesn't matter if they know 40 words CW or they do this or they don't do what. But,
Yep.
don't let the few minority, very small minority, that are negative towards mostly young people, I think, or new hams, get in the way.
Yeah. Like I run the Yark net, and we always get kicked off the frequency by some guy saying, "You guys aren't real hams. You're less than 50 years old." Like, it's just like the fact that you're young means you shouldn't be here. It's totally wrong.
3 feet barefooted uphill or backwards to take the test. You're not a real ham.
Exactly.
Well, the gentleman, I forget his name, you talked about building stuff, and I think that's, when I was a youngster, and all through up until the last 15, 20 years, I really was car hobby. I've always been in electronics. But if I wanted to get 200 horsepower out of my engine, 200 more, I had to build it.
Uh-huh.
I had to do a lot of things. I had to pistons and cams and everything else. It was the same way with radio. If you wanted more, you built, added stuff to it. It was hands-on.
Yep.
And I think that's going to keep people in. They can get to where they do stuff. Because like I said, a guy goes out and buys him a brand new car now, or a truck, especially a diesel, he plugs a programmer in it and he sits there and pushes a few buttons and he's got 250 extra horsepower. Well, what did he do?
Mm-hmm. Push some buttons. Didn't know what
I
it
mean,
came.
Which buttons to push.
Yeah.
I think that's the deal. If we can keep the younger people or anybody that gets a license, keep them interested in doing things,
Absolutely.
besides just contesting, get them talking and do things. I think people have lost with texting and all that, have lost the ability to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, I can see that.
I would assume the league has tons of data that they could do analytics on and mine that would give insights into this. Are they doing that, or?
Not really. They have surprisingly little data. There was a guy who put out a state of the hobby survey, and he's totally not related to the AWL. He just did it because he's curious. Like, what is the age of the hobby? Where is the bubble? And he, but the AWL hasn't really, as far as I know, because I wasn't selected for any of the surveys that they do. And I know they are concerned because they talk about it. Like I was in the AWL Expo volunteering for the college club, and I was talking with the other people there about like, what is the state, what is AWL doing, that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, we're trying these initiatives, we're doing these things, we're putting out these grants, they're doing 100 things at once, but we often don't really see it because we don't read like the meeting minutes, or all the meeting minutes is the covering the drama and stuff. But there is a surprisingly little amount of like data analytics, like on the youth, the age of new licensees, and what are we doing with the hobby, and it's really like a grassroots sort of thing of surveys being done by just people like you guys in this room who are just interested in it, that are starting to show us like, here's the bubble in 20 years, that bubble's going to slide off and we can expect to see a huge decline, but we've got this huge bump in younger age technicians, that sort of stuff. But I'm sure once they found that out, the AWR found that out, they have open access to the data, so I'm sure they're going to try to do statistics on it. But the last time they tried this, they actually they contracted out, some company to do it, and they kind of like flopped it up and never really had any like tangible data out of it, because they just communicated. There was miscommunication in the communications hobby.
I'll shut up in a minute. Going back to what Michael said, Felix, pull that thing out of your bag. You can see this, Sterling. You were busy setting up there, talking about building things.
Is that a Ubitix?
A 40-meter.
It's
I think it's from the royal wedding.
Lunchbox.
Nice.
British lunchbox. You turn it sideways.
yeah.
Very cool.
So there's a built kit.
Mm-hmm. And that was what, like 50, like the kit?
The board is already populated. All you have to do is hook it up and maybe do a little bit of programming on it.
Yeah. The BitX, the Ubitix and BitX like line. They were really good QRP transceivers. They're all radios in a box that basically do the whole thing for like $50.
All right, so I'm going to put Cliff Cave on the spot here. What's the average age of the new technician? You guys see him come through.
Well, it varies. young people come in, we have middle-aged people, we have older people coming in, getting their first license. I think it's driven by conditions in the world today, for one thing, and hobbies. Like you were saying, a lot of people are involved with model airplanes and remote control stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, today, you need the license if you want to use the higher power with the, 2.4 gig transmitter and that in it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a varying amount of people that come in. You know, we see all ages, basically. And some of the guys come in are getting upgrades. But I can tell you, the ones that are interested in actually in amateur radio are the ones that are going to get the upgrades. The ones like if they're doing this 100-acre thing in the back country, they probably won't do it an upgrade because that's all they want to do. Same way with model airplanes, maybe. Although a lot of them probably will get their license upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as a matter of fact,
Yeah, as a matter of fact, speaking of upgrades,
well, no, hush up back there. Revoke his license, and revoke his membership.
He's the tester.
Yeah, but that's not associated with us.
That's true.
Anyway, so yesterday, Cliff and Kyle, I showed up, but I was just there. Anyway, what was the name of the club? Marshall's Club is the St. Louis
It's a long name, I don't remember.
St. Louis,
RC Model Guys.
yeah,
RC Model.
Flying Club, Flying Association.
Yeah, something like that. RC Modeling. And they were doing a presentation on FPV, which is what you brought up just a minute ago.
Mhm.
And had invited us to come and talk a little bit about, so if you want to get into FPV, you have to have a ham radio license. These guys will help you understand how to go about that. So, you know, we just did that presentation, or they just did that presentation last night. Yeah, it was last night. I'm technically on vacation. My days are merging. So last night, the other part I wanted to bring up is you were talking about, you know, youth hams, and I know that you've already brought it up. Monday at our board meeting, this was a question that Kyle brought to us. Ideas for dropping our average age, basically. One way to put it is to get younger people involved with the amateur radio side of things. And we came up with some ideas that we're going to work on and try to develop those things. But your board is working on some of the stuff that, you know, is coming up.
Cool.
Thank you.
Bill, I do have one last thing on age.
Oh, I'll take that back.
This is my final recheck and
Somebody turn off his radio when he's done.
Peters have a timeout. One of the classes, technician class, and I won't name any names because he is here. He was concerned and said, I might be too old to get into this. And I emailed back and I said, how old are you? And he said 53. And I said, well, hell, I'm 71 and I teach a class, so you're not too old. You know? Age is a number.
Mm-hmm.
Vern, were you going to say something?
No, I've been sitting all day.
Yeah, and I'm not here to exclude. Like, we don't. It's not like I'm saying like no more young ham or no more older hams in the hobby. We have enough. Everybody is always welcome. It's just like there are young people out there who would want to do this, but they don't know about it. We need to bring it to them, get them in schools, get them in scouting, that sort of stuff. And us ourselves, like you said, already have initiatives to meet this. And don't wait for the ARRL. I say this to like clubs all over the place. Don't wait for the ARRL to fix all these problems because they're not going to. These kinds of things are from the ground up. The ARRL could do better and say like, here's some ideas to improve Elmering and, you know, open your shack up and that sort of stuff. And I've been trying to push for that in like the newsletters and QSTs, and it comes down to I need to write something for the article for the QST to get them to publish something like that. But this is where change happens. It's at the bottom, so bottom up, and that's all. Oh, we can go on all night. Yeah, back there. Go ahead.
I gotta go pick up Rebecca.
All right.
I just wanted to say something. I come at this from a bit of a different perspective because I happen to be blind. But please keep in mind if you're going to be suggesting that schools offer this kind of thing, that sooner or later there's going to be some kid going to show up who's blind who's going to want to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, most of the digital software is not accessible.
Oh yeah.
In fact, most of the radios are not accessible. And the league refuses to make its digital version of QST accessible. I can tell you right now that there are several hundred blind hams in the United States, but most of us are older. But for example, if a ham right now gets his license and wants a watt meter, he cannot get one to determine his output and his SWR, the talk. They don't make them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, I've become aware of 2 volt ohm meters that are accessible. And the only brand of radios that is accessible basically is the Kenwood brand. I myself am working on trying to use a Ten-Tec Omni 7, which supposedly has software that you can use with it. And so I will be exploring the possibility of using that software to control my radio through my computer. But for the most part, the manufacturers are not interested in making their radios and various equipment accessible. And it makes it very difficult for those of us who are blind to be able to participate in the hobby.
Yeah, it's a shame. Handy Hams is the group of hams that caters to accessibility, blind, deaf, and everything in between. And they always have a big say. They try to have a big say in like the design of radios and marketing to the ARRL to open this up to all people, But it's been troublesome because I guess it's just like, oh, there's not actually that many, so it's not cost effective for us to make this text to speech thing, and it's really sad. Like that needs to change.
And there's the computer technology is there. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
using screen reading software for more than 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
But Ten-Tec used to make their radios accessible, and they don't anymore.
True.
I don't know what the regulations are, but I know our company, for software and hardware, we had to, before we can release a product, have to specify the degree of accessibility that's in the product. Whether it's compatible with readers, screen readers, and things like that, or not. But I guess that's not something that's mandated across all products. We couldn't
Right.
release a product unless we made some concessions to that and at least describe what the capabilities were for accessibility.
Yeah, I don't think ham radios are.
And radio guys don't do that. I mean,
Right.
the manufacturers.
I'm in the same boat as, gentleman in the back corner there, and when I was at Dayton just a couple of weeks ago, a few days ago, I spoke to the folks at ARRL specifically about that issue. And, a lot of screen readers will read, Word, but may not read PDFs, or, and they indicated that one of the challenges, and this is true not only for QST, but even the books that they sell. I just wish there were CD-ROM versions of those books, and they said that it's managing the, the ability of it for duplication and kind of losing the
Yeah,
revenue stream.
copyright. Because
Right.
if you get an electric version, you
It's
can.
part of it. There's a group called HamPod that does have accessibility for the Elecraft products that will basically talks, but as he said, historically Kenwood's been the one
Mhm.
that really did it, and they're still doing it. But it's, yeah, I wish, my screen reader will not read the digital version of QST, so. But I can print it out and have another reader that'll read it.
Goodness.
Any other questions for Sterling?
Yeah, this was good.
Cliff, you're done? I'm done.
He's checked out. Okay.
Sterling, thank you again for coming out.
Appreciate it. It's my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Anything else club related before we break up? I gotta go to my email. I'm trying to find 3 people.